It still exists mentally. But they are not simply trying to oppress black people, oppress or repress. They're trying to exterminate. And that's why homosexuality is being pushed right now as an extermination campaign, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Other health impairment, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is really absence of my daddy from my home disorder. 75% of the black boys diagnosed with ADHD don't have a male father figure in their life. It has nothing to do with a brain dysfunction. It's about a black family dysfunction. Next slide. Let's talk about homosexuality, because I know y'all looking around and you're like, what's going on? Every boy got a little bit of sugar in his tank. Skinny jeans, no jeans is off the hook. Where did it come from? In 1972, the Rockefeller World Population and Planned Parenthood had a meeting where they suggested that homosexuality should be taken out of the DSM, which is the Bible that we use to diagnose our disorders. Take it out and spread it through the black community. Make it legal so we can use it. That was in 72. In 1973, the American Psychiatric Association had an annual convention where they voted to take homosexuality out of the DSM. Until April of 1974, homosexuality was a mental disorder. It's only been normal for 37 years. Did you know that? Did you know that? In 1974, that's when it came out. What else happened in 1974? Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, y'all remember him? Yeah. The population control junkie penned his famous memorandum, the National State Security Memorandum 200 or 2000, where he said that we should use sex education as a weapon to reduce unwanted births. He was working with Planned Parenthood. This is also the same time you get the first documented cases of what? HIV/AIDS. They made homosexuality legal, they gave black men the AIDS, and now AIDS is the #1 killer of black women because of brothers on the down low. Next slide. Now, having said that, I want to say this. I do therapy with homosexual and lesbian African American and Hispanic teenagers. When I give you the history of homosexuality, I'm giving it to you because you need to know what it is. Because we as a community, as African people, for those of us who know we African, because some of us think we come from the center of the earth, another planet, all that crazy stuff. But for those of us who know we African, okay, we recognize that we do not have a cultural history of cohabitating with the same gender. Are you with me? Now, if we go to Greece and Rome, we find that that history is buried deep within their culture. Many of the Greece and Roman gods were homosexuals and pedophiles simultaneously. If you don't believe me, study the history of Apollo, study the history of Zeus, and you will see that when they weren't being godly, they were busy being involved in pornography and having sex with children. And that's why when you look at a lot of the paintings of European gods, you will see that there was a lot of baby angels around. Those babies didn't become angels until the last 100 years. They were simply the child concubines that were always there to be used however God so chose. That's why the Roman Catholic Church, the men don't get married. Why? Because the woman is guilty of making Adam bite the apple from the tree. So you became the embodiment of the devil, black woman. Okay? This ain't what we believe, but this is the theology. And since the woman works with Satan for man's downfall, no godly man would partake in a woman, because to partake in a woman would be to partake with Satan. So they partake with each other. And that's why you find no word for homosexuality in any of the hundreds of African languages on the continent at no time before the European invader came. There's nothing African about the behavior. But our children who are of that lifestyle, we have to be very careful how we engage them. Why am I saying that? After saying what I just said, because black homosexuals and lesbians have one of the highest suicide rates in our community. Did you hear what I said? So when I work with them, I can't give them the political. They're not ready for that. I have to first do what? Unwrap the mental scars that they have. Because most of the lesbians and homosexuals that I work with were what? Sexually molested by a blood relative prior to the age of 12. We got a big problem of incest in the black community, and ain't none of us doing anything about it because we don't want to turn Uncle Johnny in. But you fail to realize by not getting Uncle Johnny any help, you give him permission to molest all the nieces and nephews. And so about 40% of the kids who are sent to me for evaluations don't have learning problems. They got emotional problems coming from incest and child sex abuse. Yes, protect your children. For those of you who got young babies, don't you let them out of your sight unless you are absolutely certain that the person you entrusting your child's innocence with loves them just as much as you do. Because it only takes 1 minute for the innocence of a child to be taken away. And when it's taken away, when a boy's first sexual experience is with a man, it does something to his unconscious that makes him continue to crave that type of sex, even though he hates it. Which is why homosexual black males have one of the lowest self-esteem rates in the country. You see that? So you don't want to beat up on the victim. What we should have done was prevent the crime from taking place in the first place. Oppositional defiant disorder, conduct disorder, disruptive behavior disorder. How much money is Wall Street making off of drugging our boys with these 4 labels? Because $50 billion a year, black people. $50 billion a year because Raheem can't sit still more than 2 minutes, and you blaming Raheem because the teacher can't teach him, nor does she want to teach him. How we expect black boys to ever be able to be successful in a system that's run by middle-class white women whose children don't even go to the same kind of schools they teach in? Next slide. And I didn't say there wasn't black folk who participate in this. I know a lot of Negro educators who shouldn't be in the schools. I know principals and teachers who come from the same ghetto that they teach in, but somehow between graduating from high school, getting that miseducation in college, and coming back to the neighborhood, they forgot who the hell they were. That's right. That's why Dr. Carter G. Woodson said that the college-educated Negro seldom of any use to his race because the education he got educated him away from who he was. And that's why he said it took him 20 years to undo the menticide that Harvard put in him. Rest in peace to W.E.B. Du Bois, but he was never able to undo that menticide. This is how psychology was used against black people. In the 18th century, Drapetomania, and this is propaganda, black people, lies disguised as facts. In the 18th century, they used to diagnose runaway slaves with Drapetomania. Tomorrow, I'm going to be in Queens, New York with Dr. Leonard Jeffries and Dr. Kamal Cambone, good friend of mine, at the African Poetry Theater in Queens, New York. From 3 p.m. until 6 p.m., there's a panel discussion on the life and controversy of Nat Turner, okay? And of course, I was born on the anniversary of the insurrection. So if you got time to drive on up to New York, that's 3 to 6 tomorrow at the African Poetry Theater. So Drapetomania was a mental disease that led the slave to believe that they had a right to be free. Did y'all hear what I just said? This is real. I'm not making this up. You can do your own research. If you were an escaping slave, you were diagnosed with Drapetomania. What was the cure for Drapetomania? According to Dr. Samuel Cartwright, the Southern racist doctor who came up with the diagnosis, he said that the best way to treat Drapetomania is to whip the living hell out of the slave. That's right. And then Dr. Samuel Cartwright from Philadelphia, who signed the Declaration of Independence, who was the first dean of the American the dean of medicine at Pennsylvania Hospital, he used to diagnose black people with nigritude. What was nigritude? A disease that rendered the brain totally useless. And what was the #1 symptom of nigritude? Black skin. And he advised that white folks don't rub up against black skin or you could catch nigritude too. ADHD is the modern nigritude, black people. ODD is the modern nigritude. 19th century, what did they do with blacks who, during Reconstruction, and during the Garvey movement, fought against white supremacy? They would diagnose you as insane. Insane for doing what? Thinking you had a right to be equal with white folks and you could be locked up in an insane asylum. Also, they would use mental retardation against black people. And we do know up until 1963, 38 United States prevented you from getting married or having children if your IQ score fell within the intellectually deficient range. Did you hear what I said? I said Hitler got his program from America. Eugenics was alive and well in America. He borrowed it from here and said so himself. But the only difference between Hitler's eugenics and America's eugenics is still going on right now. Special education is eugenics. Mass incarceration is eugenics. ADHD is eugenics. In the 20th century, I told you black power folk was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and this is what they're using with our boys today. And some people are denying employment, and you know you can't get into the military, although we don't want our sons going to war for drugs and oil. But many branches of the military will not accept your child if they were ever diagnosed with a disruptive behavior disorder. You also need to know that the CIA has legal access to any psychological evaluation conducted on any black child in America diagnosed with a disruptive behavior disorder. Why? Because one of them might be the black messiah that the government is looking for. These disorders are given to black boys who refuse to have their spirit broken in the school building. Did you hear what I said? Effeminate black boys do not get diagnosed with conduct disorder. Effeminate black boys do not get diagnosed with oppositional defiant disorder. Effeminate black boys do not get diagnosed with disruptive behavior disorders. Only the warrior children, only the warrior children are diagnosed with the label and put on medicine. Next slide. Ritalin, Strattera, Adderall, Cycler, Depakote, Zoloft, Paxil, Seroquel. What should you know about Depakote? Depakote is an antipsychotic. You don't develop schizophrenia until your late 20s, early 30s. So why are 7 and 8 and 9 and 10-year-old black children taking Depakote who don't have schizophrenia? Because in the United States of America, you can legally prescribe a drug to deal with a problem that the drug wasn't developed for. And so because Depakote has the side effect of calming you down when you're angry or relaxing you if you are aggressive, they're giving black children antipsychotics at 7 and 8 years old. And for my sisters in the audience, if any of you are nursing, you don't want to give your children no Similac milk. Why? Because the same company that makes Depakote makes Similac. When are we going to wake up? The Similac ain't nothing but liquid crack. That's why the children keep crying for more after you gave them 20 gallons of that filth. That's why we got infants looking 80 pounds. Look like they look like the Michelin Man. You know why? Because they're crying because they're looking for a fix. You done made a drug addict in 48 hours after birth. Next slide. Propaganda and persuasion. What's the difference? Propaganda is the art of bypassing resistance. Stay with me on this. I'm going to get a little technical, but you got to grab it because the Honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey said what? Propaganda has destroyed more people than open warfare. The art of bypassing resistance from the conscious mind to induce support and mental compliance in people. The whole purpose of propaganda is to do what? Instill a set of beliefs in you before you realize what happened to you. Persuasion is the art of convincing the conscious mind to induce support and mental compliance in people. Let me illustrate to you what I'm talking about. What I'm doing tonight with you is using persuasion to change the way you think. I'm not using propaganda. Why? Because in my presentation, I'm not trying to slip anything into your unconscious without your knowledge. I'm not using music and I'm not using images, the two most powerful weapons of persuasion. I'm using words. So I'm giving you persuasion, not propaganda. Next slide. Groupthink. We have to beware of groupthink. What is groupthink? Groupthink is a very powerful tool of propaganda and persuasion. It is the art of collective hypnosis and excuse my typos, I ain't got a learning disability. And persuasion is the most powerful tool in the world. Listen to me. One of the biggest problems of black people is when we want to know what to think or how to behave, we look at other mentally ill black people. Are y'all with me? Yes. Let's go back to the Obama campaign. Despite the fact that he did not speak out when he was interviewed in the Philadelphia newspaper for our good brother Mumia Abu-Jamal, I thought a lot of people would drop their support for Barack Obama because he refused to support Mumia's case as well as the other black political prisoners. But black people continued to run after Obama. Why did you vote for Obama? Because other blacks were voting for Obama. Are y'all with me? So the groupthink, the collective hypnosis is running black folk. Now some of y'all saying, well, Brother Umar, hold on, he is the first. Shouldn't we in some way, shape, or form show him some support? No. Listen to me. White supremacy is white supremacy regardless of the face that it puts in front. The Obama thing is nothing new. They've been putting black folk to do their bidding since the beginning of time. Why are you so head over heels over him? You know why? Because many of us suffer from light skin supremacy. And because he looks like that which we thought we could be, we support him. And you know what light skin supremacy is. I didn't say that light skinned people were automatically struck with a supremacy complex. You can be blue, black, purple, and be a light-skinned supremacist. Are you with me? Light-skinned supremacy is any black person, regardless of skin color, who thinks the lighter you are, the better you are. And I would argue that most light-skinned supremacists are dark-skinned people. The Obama campaign Hitler's rise to power, and religious indoctrination all rely on groupthink. In psychology, do you know that there's a whole subfield of studying group psychology? Do you know that the way you think can be changed more readily when you are surrounded by other people who think the way they want you to think? Yes. Many of us think we're independent thinkers, don't we? No, we're not. No, we're not. Why do you think they always invite you to church or to the mosque? And I'm not knocking the church or the mosque if that's your religion. I'm simply saying turn it into a tool of revolution, or like Dr. John Henry Clark said, throw it in the trash.
That's right.
See, we got to recognize something. I don't throw no African away because of what they belong to. Whether you're Christian, Muslim, Hebrew, Moor, whether you're a Kappa, a Zeta, a Alpha, I love them deltas, regardless, okay, of what you are. It's not that makes you good or bad. It's what you do with your membership in those organizations. If a brother tells me he's a Mason, I'm not going to throw him to the curb. Prince Hall was one. The grandfather Pan-Africanism, Martin Delaney, was a Mason. But it's what you do with it. Now, if you're going to join one of those secret groups so that you can become an elitist Negro and look down on the rest of us, then I'm not going to have anything to do with you. But if you're joining that group to try to make some good come out of it, I got no problem with you. We have to stop being so surface-oriented in our decisions. Life and people are a little bit more complex than that. Next slide. How vulnerable are you? The average American watches 1,550 hours of television a year. The average American, this includes Negroes, listens to 1,160 hours of radio every year. The average American reads 180 hours worth of books and journals, an additional 110 hours spent reading magazines, Source, Ebony, Jet, all those light-skin supremacy magazines. And 50,000 new books are published every year. How many of those 50,000 are coming from the FBI and CIA directly? You don't even know. Next slide. Conscious versus unconscious. You got to understand the conscious mind versus the unconscious mind. Your unconscious is 50 times more powerful than your conscious mind. You have to understand that. Propaganda is the weapon of the unconscious mind to get you to believe something without you even realize that the thought was put into you. Persuasion is the weapon of the conscious mind. When I want you to use your mind and your thought to come to a conclusion, I'm using persuasion. I want your conscious mind. But if I want you to believe something and I don't want your critical analysis skills to be shaken up, then I use what? Music, sound, to get past. That's why when you sleep to the television and you sleep with the radio on, all of that information goes to your unconscious, whether you consciously know it or not. And at certain points in your life, you remember things that you can't even remember learning in the first place, because you cannot turn off the mind. Your mind is alive until the day you separate from your physical body. And many of us think because we're so conscious that we can do what? Prevent our unconscious mind from being conquered by propaganda. You can't do it. Why? Because propaganda is multifaceted. What do I mean by that? It uses words, it uses sound, it uses imagery, it uses information in the context of the environment to influence you. With all those different types of information modes going on at the same time, there's no way in hell any of us cannot be victim. The only way to prevent yourself from being victim to false music or false movies or false images to do what? Don't expose yourself to it in the first place. It's amazing when I go speak in black churches, the number one question comes up is the propaganda of the white Christ figure. Does Jesus matter? What difference does it matter if he's black, white, or purple? Okay? It does matter. Why? Because the human brain stores all information in images. Everything you know is in an image in your unconscious and conscious mind. And because the unconscious automatically makes sense out of the information in it, no matter how much you tell your children that Jesus was black, as long as they go to church on Sunday and see him as a white man, the unconscious will believe he's white despite all of the written proof you have against it. If you're trying to win a war, against images with books, you're going to lose. Because your mind does not store words. It converts it into a picture. So when they see a white Christ, no matter all the proof we know of Jesus being an African, what wins out? The image. Because the brain is creature of what? Repetition. What does that mean? That means that no matter what it is, whatever you continuously feed your brain, it will come to belief. Domestic violence. And we have a big problem of domestic violence in our neighborhood. A lot of black women are being beat on by their men, and sisters are suffering in silence. Why? Because you don't want to turn in the father of your children to the cops and then have to face your babies. So a lot of our sisters are suffering in silence. But the weapon that is used by the abusive brother is what? Propaganda. Of wearing down your self-esteem, black woman, to the point that you don't think nothing of yourself, even though you thought the world of yourself before the victimization. You say, I know who I am. He won't be able to mess up my mind. Yes, he will, because the brain will always fall victim to that which it hears the most. Effective mind control uses persuasion and propaganda at the same time. Next slide. Images and music rule the mind. Accurate information is no match for the subliminal programming that takes place through unconscious conditioning by way of music and images. Since ancient times, music and images have been used to brainwash, control, and condition large groups of people. When you study the culture of Nile Valley African civilization, that was a propagandized culture, but for beneficial reasons. They built the statues extremely large to impress upon Africans the greatness of who they were. That was propaganda. Using images to create a people. That's what Marcus Garvey did. Mr. Muhammad did it. The Panthers did it. The problem is we ain't got no propaganda campaign. We ain't got no propaganda campaign against homosexuality, against skinny jeans, thug life, none of that. Whatever the European propaganda machine wants to teach black children, we let them go ahead and teach them. Every country has a flag and a song. The flag is the image. The national song is what? The music. The two chief means. That's how they induce what? The patriot spirit. So when you hear the Star Spangled Banner, y'all jump right on your feet. Oh, Lord, that's my country. And you know what's so crazy about it? A black child pledges allegiance to the flag of the United States 180 days out of the year. In most states, there's mandatory 180 school days. That's 180 times 12 years of school. If you throw in kindergarten, that's 13. If you throw in preschool, that's 15. For the first 15 years of their lives, they pledged the flag more than 12,000 times and haven't pledged allegiance to the red, black, and green not even once. The average black person will die. Most of you sitting here will leave your physical form having never pledged allegiance to this flag, the only one that was ever created for the whole race.